Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I hope this day finds you well. Um, Sorry I didn't get posted last night. My computer was playing I Don't Want to Play last night, and I'm hoping that it works today. So I'm going to post this morning, and I will try to post again this evening to make up for it. After my Bible study at Golden Living last night, I don't know how many of you follow me on Facebook that are actually watching. I put up a post talking about how God is so faithful and that He always follows through. If you're wondering what I meant by that, I told you that I pray about everything that I put on on my YouTube account as far as the videos go, and that's very true. I do. Sometimes I'm not quite sure if I hear God or not before I post. And I asked Him for some confirmation. Well, one of the things I was thinking about posting last night that I'm going to post this morning was on grace again. It's been on my mind. It's been on my heart. And so I asked God, I said, well, I just did one. I said, but I need some confirmation as to whether or not that this is what you want me to do. And when I went to the Bible study last night, the Bible study that I was doing last night, little did I remember because I can't remember, was had to do with grace and God's grace for us, and how not any of us would be here without it. So I thought that was pretty remarkable. I don't think you can get much clearer of a sign than that. There's many other examples I could use, but that was the most recent one. But yes, yet again, I'm gonna talk on grace. Actually, what I'm gonna do is when I first moved here, no, I hadn't moved here yet. It was back in 2012 for the Women's Sunday at the Salvation Army in Leavenworth Corps. I was asked to come be the guest speaker for that Sunday. It was the second sermon I had ever given, and nerves were rattling, as you can tell. Probably realize, but I want to go ahead and give that again. It might be just a little bit longer than 10-15 minutes. I don't know. I haven't done it in a while, obviously. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that sermon today. It was called By Grace Alone. Now, I know we all watch TV, and this is kind of giving away my age. But how many of us remember the Beverly Hillbillies? It was the most successful sitcom of all time. It aired on CBS from September 26, 1962 to May 23, 1971. It was a rags to riches story of a bug-tussled Tennessee family who struck oil in the Ozark Mountains. Soon after striking the black gold, the Clampetts moved to Beverly Hills, And the television episodes are built upon the clash between the uncivilized hillbilly culture and the worldly Beverly Hills culture. Despite living in a large, beautiful mansion, Jed, Granny, Jethro, and Ellie Mae lived as if they were still back in the mountains. They retained their culture, their attire, their country values. Their newfound wealth didn't corrupt their core beliefs, and the local culture didn't change the way they lived. They lived in the Beverly Hills, but they were not like anything or anyone there. They were true to their ideals and to their values. In one way or another, we all have become tainted and corrupted by the world around us. God's church and His people are slowly losing the culture war and core values of our faith. They are deteriorating. Our faith is being challenged daily by the world, and some people compromise their spiritual values for selfish achievement. We're no longer content to simply earn a living and raise God-fearing children who are well-adjusted. Instead, we want to amass a fortune, live in a brick mansion, travel the globe, develop high-achieving, self-sufficient children, and drive Mercedes-Benz or Mustangs or Corvettes or whatever the rage is these days. But years ago, social status was not important. Instead, it was a person's character and reputation and integrity that meant everything, especially if they live a simple and humble life. The search for worldly success today eclipses a nourishing relationship with Jesus Christ and a development of our moral character. People are abandoning being dependent on God and His graces by thinking that they know best and are pursuing their own agenda. We've got this wrong. Winning the lottery, striking it rich, striking oil in the backyard like the Clampetts, building a financial empire like Donald Trump is not what our faith is all about. If our lives are to have meaning, they have to be founded upon virtue, service, and devotion to our God and Father. Now, our personal faith is entirely dependent on God's grace rather than personal achievement. Grace is God's riches at Christ's expense, like I mentioned in my earlier video. Paul emphasizes his weakness and trials rather than boasting about his spiritual visions, revelations, and experiences. He gave us an example of his weakness and his dependence on God's grace when he reminded the Corinthians that he was forced to escape the governor under King Arius in Damascus. He was lowered down in a basket through a window to escape Jews who were trying to kill him. His escape is a reminiscent of a fleeing criminal and is a sign of human weakness and humiliation. Paul's escape in a basket highlighted his weakness, his humiliation, and disgrace. Yet Paul's escape showed the grace of God that allowed him to survive so that he could preach the gospel. God delivered Paul so that God's plan for his life could be fulfilled. Paul's life was spared through his humility and dependence on God's grace. His trials strengthened his faith and changed his outlook in struggling through tough times. His escape at Damascus, his stoning, his being dragged out by the mob at Lystra, the shipwreck, the thorn in his side, and other trials transform Paul so that he becomes totally dependent on God for his mercy and survival. He saw his sufferings as a means of inner strength. They enabled him to become closer to Christ and were a source of blessing. Paul endured these sufferings because he knew humility produced by suffering safeguards the divine treasures of the soul. Paul was content to patiently endure his sufferings because they were an example of his virtue and faith. The sufferings also benefit us because through them our hearts become pliable and responsive. In other words, suffering allows us to be more open to God so that He can constructively mold our lives the way they need to be molded. The more dangerous course is to flee from God out of fear so we don't have to face our trials. Our better alternative is to endure temporary trials and see them as an opportunity to develop our faith. Back in the fall-winter of 2009, I had a stroke. I lost my job. After a while, my daughter and I ended up in a homeless shelter in Jefferson City, Missouri. I was at my worst. I was depressed and angry. Angry because I felt God had turned His back on me. I asked myself after what I had done I asked myself often, what did I do to deserve this? What did I do that was so bad for you to turn your back on me and my daughter, God? I had my pity party for a few weeks. You know the one. Woe is me. I'm worthless. Poor me. I was sitting on my bed in the shelter, listening to the radio, crying, feeling sorry for myself, when Carrie Underwood's song, Jesus Take the Wheel, came on. I totally lost whatever composure or strength that I had left. I broke down and I cried even harder. That night, just between God and I gave my life to Him. I started attending the Salvation Army Church regularly. Every event, every function or dinner, I was there one way, shape, or form. I aggravated the Corps officers daily. I loved it, and it was the only place that I wanted to be. Within a week of surrendering to God, I got a phone call from a landlord, moved into a beautiful house, filled with furniture and food, and only a $1 security deposit. Talk about God's grace, right? I learned, as we need to learn, that it's God's grace which sustains us in our weakness. God is always near, and we should never lose hope in God when bad things happen to us. I had lost hope when the bad things happened to me. But look what happened when I got that hope back. In His timing, not our own, weakness is the vehicle by which God's grace and powers are given to us. Grace is the gift of God's own presence and actions in His creations. A Christian is saved through grace, which is a gift of God, and not a reward for good works. Grace changes a person, and they will manifest the effects of grace through righteous living. In order to receive God's grace, we must be humble, and our souls cannot attribute nothing to itself, but only to God. When God sees our souls trying, He will reward it as though it had achieved it through its own effort. Our body, soul, and very being are only here by God's grace. Everything is attributed to God alone. When man accepts the fact that he's nothing without God, that is the greatest gift that man can make and is the most precious offering to God. God will reward a humble heart. 2 Corinthians 12:9 says, or Paul wrote, "But he said to me, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in the weakness. Therefore, I will boast all the more gladly about my weakness, so that Christ's powers may rest on me." People filled with God's grace have an inexpressible and nameless joy and elation. The joyful existence of living a grace-filled life is simply beyond words, because it is heaven, and we cannot describe it with any worldly terms. Pure joy is only found in a life of virtue, service, devotion, and adoration of our loving God, and living entirely in His grace. I want to share with you an illustration that was shared with me. A pastor was traveling on a bus down a bumpy road. Seated next to him was a college student who noticed that the minister was reading his Bible. The minister asked, "Are you spiritually ready for the temptations you will face in college?" "I don't have a problem with temptation," the young man told the minister. "I have very strong willpower." The minister took a pencil from his pocket and said, "I can make this stand up on the cover of this Bible, even though the bus ride is bumpy." The young man said, "I'll believe it when I can see it." "I don't think you can do it." "Look, I'm doing it," said the minister to the young man. "Yeah, but you didn't tell me you would hold the pencil up with your hand." "I didn't have to tell you," the pastor said. "Have you ever seen a pencil stand up on its own without someone holding it, especially on a bumpy road?" The minister then let go of the pencil, which immediately fell over. "The only reason you stand is because God is holding you up with His hand. If God were to remove His hand of protecting grace, we all would immediately fall into sin, more so than what we are. Humility is depending completely on God, realizing that He upholds us by His grace. Remember, grace is God's riches at Christ's expense. My friends, we are all held up by God, even in our darkest hour. Grace alone, which God supplies. Strength unknown, He will provide. Christ in us, our cornerstone. We will go forth in grace alone. I want to invite you to go to God this morning if you haven't had the privilege of experiencing His grace. Go to Him in prayer and ask Him for it. Or if you have family members and friends or acquaintances or co-workers who are going through a difficult time and need God's grace, go to God. Ask for it. Or go to your pastor. Go to your captain. Go to somebody that you trust. Have them pray for you. They will be eager and ready to pray with you. God wants to pour out His grace on you. Come experience that indescribable joy. If God is working on you and you're struggling, come to Him. Or if you've been blessed and have seen God's undescribable grace and have an experience or a testimony that you would like to share, we have raindrops on the holiness table and pencil. If you wanna come to church and share it, that's fine. If you want to come to church and be prayed for to find God's grace, that's fine. But come and receive it. Come and ask Him. Come and experience it. Come be released. Come, let it embrace you. Come, accept the priceless gift that God is offering you. Let God work on you today. Let Him speak. Be willing to listen and hear Him. Listen with your heart. Folks, that's it for the day, or for this morning anyway. So remember, God's grace is there for the asking. Let God, let go. Let go,